There's no stopping Jim Brown on an effort like this. He goes over the top and into the end zone for his 5th touchdown of the day.
Have you ever seen an image of strength? Like this. A picture of power. Like this. A portrait of courage. Like this. Ask yourself these questions, because the answers tell you how superhuman this man really was.
You cannot make exception to these laws just because a person happens to be black or white.
Forcing the world to ask why things were the way they were, and how the rest of us could force change. He was born in the South in 1936 and raised in the North, where his legend as an athlete began. Any sport Jim Brown played, he dominated. But football was the game that lifted him to stardom. First at Syracuse University, and then to the Browns. His NFL career began in 1957, setting a new standard for how a running back could rule the game. But Jim Brown was so much more than arguably the greatest football player of all time. That was clear when he retired before he turned 30 to become a new kind of pioneer. A black action star in the movies. And that was just the start of the legacy he built outside the football field. During the Civil Rights Movement, he was front and center in the fight to earn blacks economic opportunities. He organized the famed Cleveland Summit to support Muhammad Ali and his refusal to serve in Vietnam. Then, in the 1980s, he founded the American program to provide outreach to gang members and kids in juvenile detention facilities. He never stopped looking for ways to make the country better. Those of us followed in his footsteps. Rest in power, Jim Brown. We'll keep doing the work in your name.
What a man, what a legacy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Tirico from NBC. It is an absolute honor and privilege to be with all of you for what is truly a celebration of the incredible life of Jim Brown. It's only appropriate that we do this here in Canton, the birthplace of football, here in Brown's country, all the fans of Northeast Ohio. I had a feeling that would get us off to a good start. All the fans who loved Jim Brown for years, generations of fans who have heard the stories of Jim Brown's great days at Municipal Stadium and beyond. And we're honored to do it in the presence of Roger Goodell, the commissioner, Jimmy and Dee Haslam, owners of the Browns, and all the gold jackets you see, the Hall of Famers who've come to honor and remember their fellow Hall of Famer. Thank you all for being here. Members of the Cleveland Browns, Kevin Stefanski is here as well. Thank you on this game day for being here to honor the true legend of the franchise. And about to be newly minted Hall of Famer Joe Thomas is with us as well. The first of 7,000 ovations for Joe, Annie, and the family this weekend. So I got a call asking if I'd be honored to do this, and I said, of course. Jim Brown means a lot to any of us who got the chance to meet him, and my connection is a little personal. I'm going to give it to you for about a minute or so, and then we're going to get to the program. So I grew up in Queens, New York, and you heard Jim was a son of the South, born in Georgia, but quickly following his mom a few years after she moved to Long Island, he moved to Manhasset, New York, on Long Island. It's about 12 miles where I grew up. And even growing up a couple of decades later, you heard about the legend of Jim Brown. Do you know Jim Brown won 13 varsity letters in high school? 13. He averaged 15 yards a carry in high school. But that wasn't his best accomplishment in sports. As a basketball player, he averaged 38 points a game. Do you know Jim Brown threw 2 no-hitters at Yankee Stadium when he was in high school? This is high school Jim Brown. But that's not the connection that I really feel with Jim Brown. I'm a very proud alum of Syracuse University. Jim Brown was the second black player to play sports at Syracuse University, and he left as forever the #1 athlete to ever grace that school. 10 varsity letters, All-American in football. You know his prowess there. A star in track, he finished 5th in the decathlon in addition to his football prowess. He played on the basketball team at Syracuse and averaged double digits the 2 years that he played. You may know he's a great lacrosse player in the Hall of Fame for lacrosse. But did you know that Jim Brown, lacrosse fans, you can applaud. Did you know that Jim Brown not only led the nation in scoring his senior year, but he also forced a rule change. Because of Jim Brown, you had to keep your stick in constant motion while carrying the ball because nobody could get the ball out of Jim Brown's hands when he had it in his stick. Jim Brown, groundbreaker, changed life, changed the world in so many ways. Born February 17th, you know, Michael Jordan was born February 17th, 27 years after Jim Brown was born. You would think that Michael Jordan's birthday, wow, it's the greatest athlete to ever be born on that day. Sorry, MJ. No, Jim Brown, the greatest Feb 17 of them all. 6'2", 212 pounds, 29-inch waist, massive shoulders, incredible legs. Jim Brown, you close your eyes, you can see him run. There's a picture in the Jim Brown conference room at the Browns facility of a bunch of St. Louis Cardinals at the time chasing Jim Brown. And it's just that picture when you close your mind and think about football of that era, the era that the National Football League really set a foundation to grow from. You close your eyes and think about that, you think of Jim Brown and guys chasing him, hanging on for dear life, and not able to stop him. So here's what we're gonna do for the next hour or so as we celebrate Jim Brown's life. We're gonna do it in chapters because, to be very honest, Jim Brown was one of a kind, unique, complex, different from anybody you ever met, and any of us who ever sat down with him are educated unlike we've ever been before. It's a book with a lot of pages, so that's why we're gonna break this up into chapters. And the first chapter is going to be about the dominance that he showed on the football field. So what we'll do is we'll show you a video of these chapters, and then we have a half dozen wonderful speakers to share their personal thoughts, remembrances, and reminders of what made Jim Brown one of the greats of all time. So let's begin with the video to share from 1957 to 1965, including that 1964 title, the dominance of Jim Brown on the field as a football player.
Now the game is in the hands of the men. Men like Jim Brown, the greatest running back of all time.
He was bigger and faster and stronger than everybody on the field.
Considered by most experts as the greatest fullback ever to play the game, Jimmy's harder to bring down than a wild steer.
As enormously gifted as he was as a physical entity, his mental approach to the game was even greater.
Very smart, understood blocking schemes, understood running styles, understood the whole game.
When you talk about Bo Jackson, Marcus Allen, Eric Dickerson, Tony Dorsett, Walter Payton, there's not one trait that they had that he didn't have.
He's one. He's one. Payton 2. I fall 3.
Obviously, the greatest player could have played in any era, probably in any position, really. Could have played tight end, running back, defense. You could have played anything.
Most guys that are extremely strong may not be as agile. Some guys have all the speed in the world but may not have the balance. Jim had it all.
For more on his great football career, along with his wife Dee, the owner of the Cleveland Browns, Mr. Jimmy Haslam.
Thanks, Mike, and thanks for taking time out of your schedule to be at such a very special day today. Jim Brown played 9 years in the NFL. 8 of those 9 years, he was All-Pro. He never missed a game, guys, in 9 years, never missed a game. I remember one of the first times I talked to him, I said, Jim, did you ever miss a game? And if you knew Jim well, he would lean into you when he wanted to emphasize something. He goes, Jimmy, I never missed a practice. And he had that kind of mindset. He scored 126 touchdowns. That's 1 touchdown per game. He was the MVP of the league 4 out of 9 years. So half the time, almost, he was the MVP. He averaged 100 yards rushing, and in 1964, he led the Cleveland Browns to the NFC Championship. There was no Super Bowl at the time. Unquestionably the greatest Cleveland Brown ever, and we have the second best sitting right in front of me. And arguably, as Coach Belichick said, the greatest NFL player of all time. But Jim was more than a football player. If you think about it, the last year he played football was 1965, okay? If you're good at math, that was 58 years ago. He transcended football. Jim got into the entertainment business as an actor, and then Jim was into social justice before there was social justice, if you think about it. And those of us who are associated with the NFL, I think all of us consider it a real privilege, whether you're a player, a coach, a scout, your equipment manager, no matter what you are, it's a real privilege to be involved in the NFL for lots of different reasons. D, and my favorite reason is the people you get to meet. And probably at the top of our list, and we've had the privilege of meeting lots of people, are Jim and Monique Brown. And when we bought the Browns, Jim was not associated with the Browns. And I can't even remember how it happened, but we had a long dinner one night in Cleveland for probably about 3 hours. And if you know Jim well, he was great one-on-one, pretty good in a small group, hated talking on the telephone, okay? Did not like talking on the telephone, but he was great one-on-one. And after about an hour, you realize that this was a special person. And we had the opportunity to spend time with him numerous times like that over the following 10 or 11 years. The last time Monique was during COVID, it was December of 2020, and we were out there on business. Monique and Jim had us to their gorgeous home overlooking the LA Basin. It was a beautiful night. And we got there at 6 and left at 10. And it was one of our favorite nights of all time. And people ask me, what do you take from Jim Brown? And I would say 3 things. First of all, he loved football, he loved the NFL, and he loved Cleveland Browns in Cleveland, Ohio. There's no doubt about it. And what makes that interesting is he only lived there for 9 years of his 86 or 87 years, right? He lived in California more than everywhere. But Cleveland was special to him. Not just the Browns, but the city of Cleveland, Northeast Ohio was really special to him. The second thing we noticed about Jim early on, and it carried the entire time we were with him, is that he had a rare blend of all superstar athletes, and there's a bunch of them in the crowd today, have this special confidence. Joe Thomas, I saw it time and time again, that at the right moment, they were going to make a big shot, a big block, a big tackle, throw a great pass, catch a big pass, etc. You have to have that. It's not arrogance, but it's supreme confidence that I can do this, I can beat the individual across from me, and Jim definitely had that, okay? And I remember one time, and he carried it his entire life. I remember 2 or 3 years ago as he was starting to slow down physically, he loved golf. And I said, Jim, you still play golf? And he shook his head and he said, I can't hit the damn ball out of my shadow. And he was just kind of going like this. Then he had that little gleam in his eye. If you know Jim, he would get, and he leaned into me. He says, but if it's a $150 Nassau and it's on 18 and you need a 10-foot putt, call me. and that was Jim. And I also saw the humility. Jim worked with us for 11 years, I think. He never once called and said, you should do that, you should do this, you made a mistake here. He never, ever did that. All he would do is call and say, can I help you? What can I do to help? When we had a player, particularly a player who maybe off the field was struggling, he would call and say, hey, can I have dinner with him? Can I have lunch with him? How can I spend time with him? How can I help him? And he had that kind of humility that is rare that you see with people with supreme confidence. So he's a rare blend of that. And I remember the first night we were talking, and we really didn't talk about football any, and I said, Jim, when did you retire from acting? Now, I've known him for maybe 45 minutes. He started laughing. He says, Jim, you don't really retire from acting. They just quit calling you. And just laughed, and he thought that was hilarious. But he was a guy that could also laugh at himself, okay? And then finally, what I would say is, Jim had a supreme ability to bring people together. And if you think about, and I'm sure he and Monique talked about this before he passed, think about the people he's invited to speak today, okay? One of the great players of all time, Ray Lewis, who Jim respected a lot, not just as a great player, but as a great person. And Ray, I'm sure he told you this, but I used to say, Jim, who's gonna take your role when you're not here? And he goes, Ray Lewis, without hesitating. Thought the world of Ray Lewis. Bob Arum, for those of us who grew up in the Ali Frazier era, I went to all 3 fights with my dad at the Knoxville Coliseum, closed circuit, and he understood entertainment and sports and how those coexist way before anybody else did. And at 91, soon to be 92 years old, he's still promoting fights. He's promoting one in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia with Tyson Fury in October. Still tremendous energy, but another great friend of Jim's, Rock Johnson. Most of you probably don't know that name. Rock was in jail for 19 years. Now, to put it in perspective, when he got out, he was 33, so y'all can do the math. He said, I was headed right back to jail, and somehow Jim Brown called me over to his house. I won't describe the conversation like Rock described it to me, but it was a pretty heated conversation. He single-handedly turned around Rock's life. Rock now works with people who have either been in prison or are in danger of going to prison, and he actually ran Jim's organization, American, for many, many years. People don't know that kind of thing about him, okay? John Wooten, his lifelong friend, blocking mate as a guard, probably best friend he had, I'm guessing, unbelievable person, cares deeply about Cleveland, but also cares about people and players. And then, of course, his lifelong love, Monique. So just a unique group of people that probably only Jim Brown could put together. And I would say this in closing, that as good as football player as he was, and he was obviously unbelievable, what he did after his career, I think transcended that and far surpassed his great career. And Jim had an unbelievable gift of bringing people together. Dee has in her office in Berea, where we practice and work, a picture of the Cleveland Summit. And there were about 10 individuals in there, and I can't remember them all. Some of them wouldn't know, but it was Muhammad Ali, it was Bill Russell, it was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, it was Jim Brown. And he brought them together during a period of great civil unrest, not to a bunch of hullabaloo. There wasn't a bunch of stuff going back and forth, but hey, how can we get this country to work better together? How do we get whites and blacks to focus better together? That's the kind of guy Jim Brown was, and the country is much better, of course, to have Jim Brown as a football player, but more importantly, the man. So Monique, thank you very much. We all miss him dearly. Thank you.
I don't think that there could be anything any more important than to keep young people from killing each other.
We are not going to change this world through guns and soldiers and violence. It will be through love and understanding. And the first person you've got to love is yourself.
He really wanted to affect change in the streets, and he knew he had to get guys out of their environment to open up.
And he spent his life working to raise young people up.
Mr. Brown opened this home totally to us. We would talk about how could we stop the killing.
Without him, I know for a fact I'd be back in jail or dead.
Most of the things that you do that are really good, people never get a chance to know about them. And if you're sincere, you don't care.
Here now to share more on being better, the self-improvement, and American, which was one of the foundational things that Jim Brown brought to our country and has helped so many. A guy who went from the streets to success. Please welcome Rudolph Rock Johnson.
How y'all doing today? My man said a lot of things about a man that I consider and look at as a father. I don't know my biological father, so knowing Jim and dealing with Jim for over 31 years, he is the reason why I'm free today and why I'm alive. Because without him, I will be dead or in jail for the rest of my life. And when I say this to y'all, I went to jail at 11 years old. They gave me life in youth authority, where they keep you until you're 26. I got kicked out of youth authority at 16 and went to state prison at 16, where I had to really grow up to be a man, because I'm among men. By the time I was 23, I ran all 13 prisons from one cell. I was that guy. I was that predator. I was that man that when Jim said if he could change the mindset of individuals, of predators from a negative to a positive, and put them right back in their community in a positive way, they would be just as effective in a positive way as they were in a negative way. I'm here. in a positive way. Without that man, listen to me, Jim Brown was a man. And we first met, he asked me, was I a B.I.T. or was I a man? And I'm like, who are you and where are you? And he gave me his address, and I drove up there with my .357 Magnum. When I knocked on his door, he said it again, are you a B.I.T. or are you a man? This is what men do. Men uses this. And he turned his back on me. And I kind of stomped behind him like a little baby, mad and angry. And I sat on his sofa and I had my gun on me, and I looked at him. People don't talk to me like that. He like, for real? And I never left his side. For 24 hours we talked about who he was and who he is. I knew nothing about this man until I met him. He created a program called American Foundation for Social Change that teaches the responsibility of self-determination. Without that program, I would be an animal. But with that program, it taught me that I am not cursed at birth, that I am somebody. And once I understood that and started practicing and believing in this journey, it allowed me to be the man I am today. I'm a father to my 7 kids, 6 daughters, 1 son. I'm a catalyst to many youngsters across this world. I helped Jim Brown open up American in 29 states, including Cleveland, with Box and his family. I've been around a long time. I'm 60 years old. I know I don't look it. I look kind of, I know what I'm saying, But I've been around a long time. I got shot 11 times. In 1998, my daughter at 15 got her head blown off. She was born on Thanksgiving. She got killed on my birthday. When I got home, I had a lot of guys there, and Jim came knocking on my door. And my guy said, we're not trying to hear what that old dude talking about, Rocky. We got to get revenge. We're not trying to hear it. And I said, I owe him a conversation. Because up until then, he gave me life. He was my life. And Jim looked me in my eyes and said, Rockhead, if we cross that line, there's no turning back. I said, what you mean, we, Jim? This is my problem. This is my issue. That was my daughter. He said, what about your other daughter? He said, what about all the young men that follows you and that listens to you today? And for the first time in my life, I fought my bad, negative feelings, and I went against my own neighborhood, and I started crying in front of another man, and I've never done that before in my life. That's how much he meant to me. And I turned my other cheek, and I didn't seek revenge for my daughter's death. Eventually, the dude got caught up and went to jail, but because of him and what he stood for and what he helped me understand about myself, it allowed me to be a man today that I was a responsible father, that's a hard-working citizen in our society. But Jim Brown was every bit of a man. If you knew anything about him other than sports, look beyond that. Because he was a man of men, and he transcended race, religion, and social economic status. It was about human beings. And as human beings, we are allowed to make mistakes. And human beings, we are. It's how we pick ourselves up and become the person we are today. I love you, big fella. I appreciate y'all here honoring and celebrating his life. And I hope everybody continue to celebrate this life because I miss him. I saw him 3 weeks before he passed. And when I saw him, I kissed him on his forehead and I looked at Monique. I said, big fella is something else. He's the only father I know. He's the only father I will always know. Thank you.
In my inner self, my strength was unbending. I was never going to let anybody make me feel that I was not top shelf.
Jim Brown demanded his dignity. He wanted the same respect off the field that he got on the field.
Jim always fought back. And we're better as a nation and as a people because he fought back.
Boy, you'd hear him say it over and over and over. This is our play. This is what we wanted. You know, we called for it. Let's go get it. You know, that kind of thing. And always upbeat, but always pushing.
Jim Brown was a great man who just also happened to play a great game of football.
I don't know if you remember watching the Hall of Fame game, and the late, great John Madden said, you know, when the lights go out inside the hall at night, those busts talk to each other, right? Well, if you've walked through the hall, and if you haven't, you better, you're reminded of the true greatness. And what if we could have seen a day when one of these great legends played against one of these great legends? There's a Hall of Famer to be in the class of 2023, Chuck Howley. And I thought it was appropriate today, I should say, to share this quote that Chuck had about Jim Brown. It was in Jim's obituary in the New York Times. Chuck Howley said about Jim Brown, quote, "I had one of my best days. I made almost as much yardage as he did riding on his back." The best of the best try to bring down Jim Brown and oftentimes failed. But could you imagine if you closed your eyes and we could see Jim Brown try to get tackled by a two-time Super Bowl champ, a Super Bowl MVP, a first ballot Hall of Famer who had a 17-year career and had a very similar impact and path as Jim Brown. Ladies and gentlemen, Pro Football Hall of Famer Ray Lewis.
Wow, incredible. Monique, I love you. To the entire Brown family, my goodness, the days that we've had. To whom much is given, much is required. Many are called, few are chosen. I'm talking about meeting the complete man, not the perfect man, but the complete man. 23 years ago, 2000, my son was 5 years old. If I had a choice today, if I had a wish, I would ask God to give me one more conversation with my son and Jim. So this is my conversation. When Jim walked up to me at the Super Bowl in Tampa, and they said, Jim Brown is here, and Spike Lee is here, and Hank Aaron is here. And I was like, wow, who they here? What, they here to see us? And Jim Brown walked up to me. And anybody know Jim? Jim is engaging, like he comes into you. He wants you to feel him. And Jim looked at me and he said, man, you didn't want none of this. Great. I mean, it's so awesome to meet you, Jim. I mean, you're running through walls and stuff, you know? I'm like, just getting my career started. But something that I found out very quickly about perseverance through the things that they had to go through back then, that a black man could not shower in the same showers, that because of his skin color, the things that he had to fight and continue to fight, but his persistence to never be different than another man. I sat with this man hour after hour. I remember, Monique remember this, John Wooden remember this. A few years later, Jim came to the house, and I'm like a little kid. I'm like, man, Jim Brown is in my house. And he comes up and he says, I've studied you for 12 years. And I said, Jim Brown has studied me for 12 years? But what Rock was talking about, Jim Brown had a vision. The good book says, without a vision, thou people shall perish. Jim Brown had a vision that every man is equal, regardless of his economics, regardless of his skin color, regardless of where he comes from. Jim Brown walked that. Jim Brown lived that. Empowerment, Jim Brown took authority. You didn't have to give him authority. He took that. And when a man makes up his mind to take something, be careful to be on the receiving end of that. I've never met a greater person. I've never met a greater person. All I used to do, Monique, she used to laugh so much at me and Jim because of the wars we would get into. And I had this rule. Because of who he was, I would always sit on the couch. He would sit on the couch and I would sit on the floor and I would look up at him. And everything that Rock talking about, I asked Papa, I said, Papa, teach me. Teach me. What does it mean to love your enemies in spite of? Teach me what does it mean to not want to go back and do something in the streets or be a part. Teach me how I teach others. Fathers and sons, it's time to get back together. Y'all can play with it. But when you lose somebody like this, God is only giving you a small piece of what does it mean to raise a God. Jim Brown was a walking God, an angel that God empowered. I called him Papa. His belief system. He sat me down one night, me and Monique, we was in the house and I ain't leave there till 4 o'clock in the morning. And he taught me about the power of belief. What does it mean when everything is against you and you find your greatest ability to keep getting up? I want to change it a little bit because the good book says that when a child comes into this world that we should mourn. And when a legend like him go home, we should rejoice. This man will not only be remembered, he will be rejoiced in the hearts of Rock and every gang member and every Hall of Famer and everybody who's ever felt any type of racial tension. God is always equal. God don't see color. Jim don't see color. I'm gonna tell you something, and I'm gonna let you go. God created a man of God, an icon, a culture icon, an activist, an athlete, an actor, a husband. And the greatest thing that ever came from any of that, Rock said it clearly, he became fathers to the fatherless. He gave hope where there was no hope. Our rule, we have a rule, every man in here. I challenge every Hall of Famer in here today. Jim don't die in vain because fathers got to get back with their sons and you got to sit with them and you got to teach them the way. Because this world ain't gonna teach it to him. This man committed his life to this. And now it's our turn. Young men, talk to more men than you play on social media. I promise you. I never forget the last conversations, Monique, we at the house. And I come in there and he's on his walker and he come around the corner. And soon as I look up, I'm like, he's gonna say something smart to me every time. So I'm kind of bracing myself just in case he wanna come off the walk and give me a little punch. So I'm kind of bracing myself. And I said, Papa, okay. I said, here we go. You starting this mess again. Here we go. He walked up, he said, if I put this walker down, I still don't think you can stop me from getting the yard. I said, Monique, would you please get your husband, please? This guy. But it was leaving you with who he was. A lot of fathers truly believe it's what you can give your children that will make you happy. It's not what you can give your kids. It's what you can leave your kids. You leave your kids hope, faith, love, promise. Jim Brown. A lot of people are trying to figure out ways to go to the moon. Papa, if you don't do nothing else, whisper to my son and let him know I'll see you both real soon. God bless you.
I saw the movie industry as a out. You had the same kind of visibility, and you could break down more barriers because the movie industry was very segregated, and there were things that black actors were not supposed to do.
Jim Brown has been underrated in terms of the roles he embodied in the late 60s and early 70s in Hollywood.
This is a step that had to be taken. I'm happy that maybe I'm the one that has taken it.
Jim changed Hollywood financially. It opened doors because all of a sudden Hollywood realized that there was a black audience that they had been missing all along.
I was a physical actor. I was the hero. And that's the way I looked at it, because we needed that as African Americans.
An entertainment trailblazer, for sure. If you think back to that time when Jim Brown left football and showed up in Hollywood, movies like The Dirty Dozen, among others, there were not as many black actors in roles, and Jim just wanted to play the hero. He just wanted to play somebody on the screen that was pretty close to what he was in real life. And speaking of trailblazers and men who've been a part of the entertainment scene over the years, this gentleman has, as was alluded to earlier by Mr. Haslam, he has gone for decades promoting some of the top fights around the world and understands what a big event, a big moment in the celebrity culture of the West Coast can bring to the world. For his reflections on Jim Brown as a trailblazer, please welcome the founder and CEO of Top Rank, Mr. Bob Arum.
Thank you, Mike. It was back in 1965, and I had just left the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York. And I was in private practice, and one of my clients was a company that was distributing closed circuit of boxing in big events. And they were doing a fight between Ernie Terrell and George Chuvalo, and it wasn't doing very well. And they asked me what they could do to get some attention to their venture. And this is back in 1965, not so long ago. And I told them, let's have a black guy as a commentator on the telecast. Now, this is 1965, during my lifetime, and there had never been a black person on a telecast of a sporting event or a news event. I mean, Mike would be interested in that because he, like so many other of the commentators, happened to be people of color now. But in '65, that wasn't the case. And I was assigned the task of finding somebody to be a commentator. And through a mutual friend, I met Jim Brown. And he was hired as a commentator for the princely sum of $500. And after the fight, I went to dinner with Jim, and he told me, you shouldn't be the lawyer for these people. You should be a promoter. And I said, well, you know, I'd never seen a boxing match before. And the only one that was worth even bothering with was Muhammad Ali. And I said, he's taken. And Jim said, no, he isn't. I'll arrange for a meeting with Ali. And a month later, I was in my office in New York, and Jim called me, and he said, Ali is in a hotel suite in New York and wants to see us. So with Jim, I went over to meet with Ali and his advisors, and before I knew it, I was the promoter of Muhammad Ali. And we formed a company called Main Bout. And the first fight we were to do was to be in Chicago. And within about a month after announcing the fight, Ali's draft status changed from not being eligible to go into the Army, because at that point in time, even though he was a high school graduate, the schools in Louisville were so great that Ali couldn't read or write, and so obviously couldn't pass the test that he was provided. And they reclassified him 1A. And that's when Ali said, I'm not going to go into the Army. I got nothing against the Viet Cong. And we were really in trouble because we got thrown out of Chicago where the fight was going to be held, and no city in the United States would accept the fight. And obviously, I had no experience, but Jim was there constantly. Don't give up. Don't give up. We'll find a way. And we went to Montreal, out of the country, and we signed a contract to do the fight at the Forum in Montreal. But then the mayor of Montreal said, you can't do the fight here, because he was threatened by the American Legion that they were going to do in Montreal a World's Fair, and they were going to boycott it. So somehow we ended up in Toronto, and the owner or half owner of the Toronto team and building had to buy out his partner in order to get the fight on. And we did the fight, and that launched our company, Main Bout. And then we promoted some fights for Ali. We first took him out of the country, and then in the United States. And all the while, I was working for a way to save the situation with Ali because his criminal indictment was coming. And I was fortunate enough to meet with Lyndon Johnson, who was president of the United States, and we arranged a deal for Ali that he didn't have to go into the Army, but didn't have to put a uniform on. He'd do some exhibitions and continue his career. And then Jim and I had a meeting, and we discussed the fact that this was a great opportunity to get Ali to accept the deal and to have a meeting with all of the top professional black athletes in the country. That's now known as the Summit something. And they would convince Ali to take the deal, and because Jim was so interested in economic parity for black people, that the closed-circuit exhibitors would now be chosen from among all the black athletes. Now, this was a great development because in those days, professional football players were making very little money, and a closed-circuit operator of a big heavyweight fight could make considerable money. So Jim got all of these athletes together. You've seen the picture, but this is the real true story behind it. All of them came to that meeting, and John Wooten is here. He was at that meeting, and he'll tell you about it. And their goal was to convince Ali to take the deal that Lyndon Johnson had offered. And after some of them talked, Ali got up and talked for 3 hours and convinced all of these college graduates, which the players were, that he was right and they were wrong, and what he was doing was the right thing. And so we continued with Ali's career for a few more months, and then he wouldn't step forward, and they convicted him of draft evasion or something like that, and he couldn't fight for 3.5 years. After a federal judge in New York said that that wasn't grounds for taking away his license, we were given the opportunity to promote Ali again, and I formed my company called Top Rank after talking to Jim, who said, by all means, go ahead, everything is going to be great. And Top Rank is now the leading company for promoting boxing, not only in the United States, but all around the world. And that's thanks to Jim Brown and Jim Brown's vision. Jim had the idea, and it was an idea that was so simple, that all people should have the opportunity to succeed in this economy. He established the organization that led to offices all over the country, because unless Americans realize that if we didn't integrate the economic viability of everybody in the United States, we would fail as a country. Now, we haven't done it completely, we haven't done it a lot, but thanks to Jim Brown, it is now, I think, something that we can see happening. Equality not only at the ballot box, but equality in economic opportunity. And if in this day, hopefully not too far off, we reach that goal, I think so much of the thanks will go to the leadership of the great Jim Brown. Thank you very much.
That was a hell of a story. That was really cool. Wow. As you can tell, Jim Brown had a lot of friends. One of them is someone who's probably very familiar to many of you. He was part of the great group New Edition. His music has sold over 15 million copies worldwide. He has been nominated for a Grammy, and only appropriate to have a musical interlude of someone who is a friend and who counted Jim Brown as somebody special to him, and performing a song that you would think would make sense at a celebration of Jim Brown's life. Here to perform A Change Is Gonna Come, please welcome Grammy-nominated artist Johnny Gill.
I was born by the river in a little tent. Oh, oh, just like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. It's been too hard living, and I'm afraid to die, because I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. It's been a long time coming, but somebody know that I know that I know that you know that a change has gotta come. Oh, yes, it will. Then I go to my brother. I said, brother, 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 won't you help me, please? Then he winds up, yeah, oh yeah, he winds up, he knocked me, said he knocked me right back down on my knees. There was times when I thought I wouldn't last very long, but I want y'all to know only through God now I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Listen. Then I go to my brother. He said, I asked him again, I said, brother, 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 can you help me, please, yeah? But then he wind up, yeah. Said he wind up, yeah. Said he knocked me, said he knocked me, said he knocked me on my knees. There was times when I thought I wouldn't make it very long. I don't know about y'all, but when I depend on God, I know He helped me to carry on. It's been a long, if you don't mind, y'all can stand up and give it to Jim tonight. Said it's a long time coming. Said I know a change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Oh, yeah. If y'all don't understand, will you just wave your hands? Said a change is gonna come. Said a change is gonna come. Said a change is gonna come. You know what? All you got to do is stand, obey His will, stay on your knees. Said I know. Said I know a change is gonna come. Said I know. Said I know. A change is gonna come. Oh, yes, it will. Oh. Said a change is gone to come.
I was born black, but I didn't live black. I was trying to live the way that everybody else was living. But there was segregation at that time. There was discrimination. This country was a mess.
He organized the famed Cleveland Summit here in 1967, which in Jim's wisdom expanded to how do we empower economic advancement and economic development opportunities amongst people from all backgrounds and all races.
For me, that picture signifies the increasing willingness of Black Americans to come out of their comfort zone and confront the powers that be on issues that were important to us.
The change that he represented, I think he's one of the most important cultural figures in American history, plain and simple.
One of the gentlemen who was there for some of that change and continued to be a part of it after is John Wooten, who served as the chair of the Fritz Pollard Alliance, so important in getting more blacks, more minorities involved in the National Football League's coaching ranks. He was a championship executive a couple of times. He was an executive on a Super Bowl winning team, but was also a teammate of Jim Brown's from 1959 to 1967, and part of that much talked about 1964 Browns championship team. For some reflections on Jim and the catalyst for change, please welcome our second to last speaker here this afternoon, John Wooten.
Thank you, thank you. Well, I tell you, bad enough to have to come behind Ray Lewis and Bob Arum, and now I gotta come behind Johnny Gill. Well, I thought somebody said life is fair. I was thrilled, honored, and what a privilege when Monique called and asked if I would speak here today. Jim Brown, you've seen the TV and your memories and so forth. You know all about how he was a great athlete, great football player that he was. I want to talk to you about what you've heard over and over tonight, the great person that he was, the great vision that he had. He said to me, Woot, we're not going to march. We're not going to be on the sit-ins. But we got to get in the fight. And the fight is an economic and education thing. The human dignity is what all of this is about. Respect everyone is what we have to have. And so I say to the athletes all over this country, NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball, everywhere, take it upon yourself to be involved in your community. To the NFL players, there's an office in every NFL team called the Player Engagement Office. office. Take it upon yourself to go and tell that engagement officer, I want to be involved. I want to volunteer. I want to give of myself to make my community a better place to live. Human dignity, respect of everyone. If you agree with what I'm saying to you this afternoon, let's stand right now with hands raised and say, Jim, we're going to follow what you set out, what you showed us to do. We're going to stand for human dignity. Repeat, for human dignity. Respect everybody. Human dignity. Respect everybody. Thank you. There's one other thing that I want to do here before we leave the podium, and that is to say, Ray Lewis, stand up, my friend. In front of the entire world that we're talking to this afternoon. This is the man that Jim chose to be the next leader of the athletes. He told me that, he told you that. He told you that because I know that he told you that because he told me, Woods, this is our guy. And this afternoon we're saying, Ray, John Wooden is, as you see, he's cane, everything. It's time for him to go home. Look out the window. Commissioner Roger Goodell, this is the new leader that we want. One last thing, all players who played with Jim from 57 to 65, if you're in the audience, will you stand, please, so that we recognize you? All players. Okay. It's been a great afternoon, just outstanding. And we want to say lastly, know and understand this is a great country. I'm standing here today before you, knowing how great this country's been to us. And all I'm saying to you is this: continue to believe in human dignity for everyone, respect everybody. This is a great country. We've had a great evening. And I remember the story of Rock Johnson because Jim told me exactly what you said here today. He told me about the incident of you and so forth. That's the kind of situation that we had. Bob Arum, what he told you here is all about the Negro Industrial Economic Union, the BEU, the America I Can. All of this is coming out of Jim's mind because we cannot afford We cannot afford to stand on the sidelines. Be involved in your community. This is a great country. There's no country better than this country. But we must do what we must do, and that is human dignity and respect each other. Thank you, Monique, again, for allowing me to come and say thank you, thank you.
When you look at the NFL now, I mean, it's a league with a very large number of African-American players. This wasn't the case when Jim played. You had all these old stereotypes. Jim was a dominant black star during this time when there weren't that many black players.
I mean, I was a big Jim Brown fan. I mean, matter of fact, that's why in high school I was number 32 because of Jim Brown.
Jim Brown not only broke rushing records and ran around people and broke tackles, but he also broke down color barriers and stepped forward and was willing to speak up on the behalf of other people at a time where it was not popular.
Whether he was carrying a football for the Cleveland Browns or carrying a message of hope in modern-day America, few people have done it with the power of Jim Brown.
For some final reflections on Jim, it's an honor to bring up his wife of more than a quarter century, Monique Brown.
Thank you all for being here today. This is a beautiful, beautiful event, and I have the honor and privilege of being here to express to you a little bit about my husband. I met Jim almost 30 years ago in Buffalo, New York. We were on a morning show together, and unlikely of pairings, you would say, looking from the outside in, but something that really resonated in my spirit, not knowing anything about football or Jim's movie career at the time, was this man was, as I learned, about him ere I can, this is a man who's dedicated his life to being of service, and not only speaking it, but actually having something quantifiable to leave in people's lives. Jim and I were bonded because of our love for human beings and humanity. And from the very beginning, we were very clear as that was a part of our mission in life. Our life's mission was to be of service. So every day, we travel all over the country, and just being by his side and having him be a champion in my life and learning so much, as you all, anyone who's here knows that when you meet Jim or when you hear Jim speak, there's jewels and gems that you never leave. They stay with you forever. And some of the things that I thought about was, what makes Jim Jim? Jim Brown, I think if I can think of one word to describe him, in a sense, would be an underdog. Jim was born in St. Simon Island, Georgia, didn't have a father, and mother was, away at a very young age working to provide in the city of Hempstead in New York. So Jim was raised by his great-grandmother and his grandmother, but very much an only child without a father. And I remember one day we were laying down and I said, Jim, you didn't have a father growing up. How did you form the fundamentals around yourself and as a young boy growing up on St. Simon Island? And he said there was one gentleman by the name of Mr. Willis. Mr. Willis had a convenience store, and he was an African-American man with a business in the community. Mr. Willis would talk to the young men and give them a sense of dignity and pride. And he said, Monique, he said, Mr. Willis taught me what it meant to have dignity. He taught me what it meant to be a man. He would give him jobs to do. He would have him groom his beard or just just do things around the community. And he was that pillar in St. Simon when Jim was growing up. At the age of, I think it was around 13 or 12, he was sent to live with his mom. His mom sent for him to come to Manhasset, Long Island, where he had a community of men. And they were not your traditional type of men. They weren't African American. They were white men who were very established professionals in the community of Manhasset, Long Island. And they really wrapped their arms around Jim and became like surrogates to him. So throughout his life, Jim had moments where he was told, by all the odds, he should have failed. I mean, he didn't have a father, went to Syracuse University, and where they didn't even want him, they told him he wasn't good enough to play. Jim didn't realize he didn't even have a scholarship. It was a community of Manhasset, Long Island, that believed in him so much. They raised money for his first year because they wanted him to be close to them. They wanted to keep their hand on him. He found out he didn't have a scholarship when his meal card didn't work one day at school. So, and not being able to play, to be Jim Brown and be told you're not good enough to get on the field, to sit the bench for your first year. All of those seeds of doubt that could have broken anyone, Jim turned those and had people around him who believed in him. His superintendent, Mr. Collins, his high school football coach, Ed Walsh. Those were the people when Jim wanted to quit school. He was going to leave Syracuse because in his mind, he felt broken. And he said, Mr. Collins came up and told me, don't ever let anyone tell you what you can or cannot do. And I think more than anything, Jim never let anyone tell him what he could or could not do. He walked the walk, he talked the talk every day. And I feel like when I think about the thread of Jim's life, and I really had a long time to think about this and all the beautiful people that he's brought together. I mean, we've only seen a snippet here today with John Wooten and the Haslam family, Bob Arum, Ray Lewis. I mean, we're just seeing a piece of it. Rudolph Rockhead Johnson. We're just seeing a small piece of really Jim being a catalyst for change. Him being a catalyst for change because he understood what it was like to not have a father, to not have. So walking with Jim every day was an honor for me. Every day we worked and pushed the vision and the movement of American forward. Every moment he would get up, he would never complain. I mean, we're talking we met when Jim was in his 50s, so late 50s to 60s, 70s, and into his 80s. Jim was never one to ever complain, never spoke bad about anyone. And it was so inspiring to be with him. And people say, oh, thank you for taking such good care of Jim. Jim was my best friend. He was my biggest champion. He would say, baby, as bad as you can be, bring it. And I really appreciated that. He had trust in me. He respected me. He listened to me. And the shift of our relationship, because it started where, he was my mentor. And then as I gained wisdom and experience, he shifted and would lean on me more. And I remember him saying, Monique, leaders eat last. Jim led with humanity. He led with strength, uncompromising strength. And I'm just so proud to be here today. I'm so grateful to everyone who's made this day possible, to all the family, all the friends. If you're here, you are family. All the fans that have come up to Jim over the years, it's always been a privilege because every story that you have is a unique experience that you share, and it's so much deeper than football or lacrosse. And I recognize that, and I honor that. So on behalf of our family and myself, I just want to thank the NFL, the Hall of Fame, the Haslam family, the Browns fans and community for making this day so special. Thank you.
First, I wasn't going to let you leave a standing ovation. And secondly, we have a special presentation. Please be seated, be comfortable for just a couple more minutes. Cap Fendig is with us. Cap is the Glynn County, Georgia Commissioner, and he has a special announcement to make to you, Monique, and the Brown family. Cap, please. There you go.
Well, good afternoon. I'm the guy that nobody knows. And it's a great honor to be here and for this occasion. I'm from St. Simons Island, Georgia. My accent authenticates that's where I'm from. I'm here because of a relationship that I've had with Jim Brown. I'm here because of a relationship out of that that's developed with Monique. And I'm here because St. Simons was where Jim Brown was born. And he loved St. Simons. And he came back to St. Simons regularly. And he would tell me, we're going to do something. I'm in my third term as county commissioner. And God has providentially put me in this place and time to help his vision come forward. Because everything that we've talked about tonight, this afternoon, is about Jim Brown's accomplishments in the past. What is going to be his accomplishments in the future? Well, they were working on that plan for St. Simons. Jim Brown has property there, and Monique has property there. And he had a plan for a place, not a house with a sign on it that said Jim Brown lived here, but a place that would be built that young people could come, have hope, get the training, go on to be a success as God created them, and not experience the past that he had to go through. And that's his vision. And we've been working on that vision on St. Simons Island to make that come forth. And we're at the threshold to do that. And I'm here to advocate for the future vision of Jim Brown and to challenge each one of you that are here today as his friends, as his associates, and Monique's. Monique should not be left holding to make this project come forth. The land is there. It's next to a great county park that provides the opportunities to do what Jim's vision was. He had one last vision. It's on paper. And she cannot be left on her own to carry that out. So I challenge the organization of the NFL, the owners of the Cleveland Brown, his friends that are here, Ray Lewis, who I was sitting next to, and the other people that are here to honor Jim Brown. You honor Jim Brown by telling Monica, you're going to take the reins and you're going to help lead her through and carry the vision that they had together so that for the next 100 years on St. Simons Island, Georgia, men and women, young ones, older ones, can come and live and find their full destiny. Will you rise up and help Monique to do that? I'm also county commissioner on St. Simons in Glynn County. And so bureaucratically and honorably, it's my pleasure from my fellow commissioners a proclamation to present to Monique that embodies all the things that have been told about him tonight, that hopefully will hang in the house, in the place that you will help Monique build on St. Simons, so that many, many generations will know the living breath and story of Jim Brown, not just his remembrance. Monique, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just add one quick thing. Cap shared with us that as of today, August 3rd is Jim Brown Day in St. Simon Island, Georgia. So thank you for that. Thank
Thank you, Cap, and thank you again, Monique. And as we bring this to a conclusion, not everyone could be here. You'll recognize a lot of the folks in this final video tribute who wanted to make sure that their voices were heard in this special celebration of Jim Brown's life.
Monique, to you and your family, words can't describe the thoughts, the prayers, the love and respect I have for you, your family, and for Jim. That responsibility that he felt he had, that wisdom that he's imparted on me, I have that same sense of responsibility, Jim, to kind of carry forward that message and that responsibility to communities that you started.
We all know his accolades on the field, and he inspired me to want to be the best football player that I could be when I became a Cleveland Brown. I just walked in the building and saw pictures of him and knew I wanted to leave a legacy, just as he did. He inspired me to want to be good on and off the field. And that's why I'm truly grateful for having his friendship, being a part of his life, and him being a part of mine. He will forever be missed. Love you, Jim.
I got a chance to work alongside Jim in his American Foundation, one of the many ways that Jim gave back to his community. We became close, and I looked at Jim as the father figure I never had. And I cherished the hours we spent at his house talking, playing backgammon and chess.
He created in me a strong woman, a strong black woman. And he didn't do that by coddling me, making me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. I didn't have that type of dad. I had the type of dad that said, listen, the world is hard. You better find yourself and be whoever you're going to be. So thank you, Dad. That's what you mean to me, strength and power.
Thank you for teaching me to have a heart for not standing for injustice, to have the heart of an activist, to have the boldness to speak and to know that my voice counts. Thank you for reminding me what a gift it is when we can play a small part in helping someone achieve their dreams or their goals, or to believe in themselves, or to love themselves unconditionally, or believe in what they have to offer as being so important that it's needed.
What can one say about Jim Brown? He's one of one, a legend, an actor, an activist, an athlete, an American, an example for the youth and for the future. We salute you. We thank you for what you left us, and we carry it on. Thank you, sir.
Jim had a tremendous impact on my life. I've learned so much from him. But as a tremendous player, leader of men, and Jim has done so much to make life better socially, and with the people that he's helped through his American program. The educational nature of that I've been through and the use of our team has been very impactful. Jim's friendship and mentoring have been really one of the highlights of my life.
To Monique and to the Brown family, we share your loss. We mourn the passing of this great man, but he will never be forgotten. He will live on in our hearts, in our minds, and his legacy will never die. God bless you, and God bless the soul of Jim Brown. May he rest in peace. A job here on earth. Well done.
Not only did he go into the community and work with gangs, work with people with prison records, work with people who had shot people and been shot. He worked with young men whose own families were afraid of them. He had them in his home. He did that because his emphasis was on action. As he told me in 1968, after all of the protests, it comes down to what are we going to do? He put action into the activist disposition among young black men and women in this country.
It's been 20 years, and we have changed many, many lives. And as I stand here right now, our people can carry out the work. They don't need me. And when I leave here, they can still carry out the work, and they don't need me.
He was the greatest athlete of the 20th century. Brown was his surname, was the name of the team that he starred for, also the color of his skin. And whether it's the impact in the African-American community in Cleveland, on the football players of many generations to follow, Jim Brown's life and legacy was truly one of a kind. And if sometimes we are prone to hyperbole, just think about the great people and the many different walks of life that came together over the last 90 minutes to celebrate his life. And tonight, as for the first time in 70, 80 years that the Cleveland Browns play a football game and Jim Brown's not here to see it, we remember Jim Brown, and we do it on a night that we always celebrate the greatness of football and the greatest individuals of football. This Pro Football Hall of Fame game is always a celebration across the country for the game and the people we admire so much, many of the Gold Jackets who are seated here. And thank you all for being here and adding to this day. And it's only appropriate that we do it here, the birthplace of football, to honor one of the greatest players and men who have graced the National Football League, Jim Brown. Thank you so much for being here, sharing in this day. Enjoy the day. And may we all remember Jim Brown. Thank you.